The world of The Division is known for its grounded, gritty, and immersive portrayal of New York City and Washington, D.C. after an extremely deadly contagion. For the most part, the lore is cohesive and realistic, with a couple of glaring exceptions. Today we're going to go through the Division thought experiment to its fullest to appreciate and critique the intention and execution of these ideas. Hey agents, it's Dispatch. Welcome to the channel, where we talk about the math, builds, lore, and game design of Tom Clancy's The Division 2. Let's get stuck into it. I was inspired to address this idea by a recent Reddit post and my frustrations with the latest season. The basic premise is this: what would actually happen in this scenario in real life? Alright, so let's take what's happened in the general scheme of things at roughly face value. All the factions exist and the country is roughly in the shape that it is approximately 9 months after the dollar flu outbreak. The estimated death rate of the contagion was roughly 80 to 90%. That means 8 to 9 out of every 10 people is dead. Man, I am killing the math today. We can assume that another 5% has been killed by other diseases, conflict, exposure, DC-62, or other causes. So we're probably looking at most 10% of the original population remains alive. For DC, that would be around 69,000 people. We have a smattering of JTF and Division agents trying to protect civilians in a few settlements from the other hostile factions. Speaking of the other factions, the Outcasts and Hyenas would basically be wiped out at this point. Both are leaderless and have taken extremely heavy casualties from the Division. The True Sons seem to still have significant forces, as do the BTSU. But here's the problem. What's the goal of the BTSU? What's the goal of the True Sons? What's the goal of the Division even? The stated goal of the Division is to, quote, save what remains, which is a nice catchphrase, or really, to ensure the continuity of government of the United States. But in terms of the actual actions of the agents we see in game, we mostly just try to help normal people and not piss off Isaac. This, along with a lot of the propaganda broadcasts, give us a picture of the reality of the situation. The United States government no longer exists. The line of succession is so far down that we don't even seem to know who is next in line, with many just kind of wigging it with Isaac. Even if someone were to come over and claim the seat, Game of Thrones style, what even would be their qualifications? At this point, there aren't any elected officials left that we know of, so it would pretty much just be a monarchy. So the United States government is dissolved. Each settlement is essentially its own mini city-state. So now, as is sensible, the Division is just trying to protect civilians. We're about to head into winter in DC, so what should we be concerned with at this time? Power, food, water, sanitation, and shelter. Even though shelter is the most important, it's contingent on the others, and we'll see why in a bit. Power is the root of everything else. Agents should be securing infrastructure, especially power infrastructure. Everyone who owns a home knows that maintenance of that home is critical. Letting any issue languish can be immensely destructive. Most of these issues revolve around water as the basic threat. If water gets into areas of your home and is allowed to remain, it will cause mold, rot, and even potentially collapse of the structure entirely. What are some ways that water can get into your home? If it's cold, pipes can burst. I even had my furnace go out in the winter of a home I was living in, and ice dams formed on the roof. These forced water underneath the shingles and flooded the home. In the world of the Division, even leaving a window open or having a broken window can let the water in. Cities have these problems on an exponentially greater scale. They rely on vast water networks. Stormwater drainage is particularly important as cities lack permeable land area to naturally soak up and distribute water. If there is any kind of flooding, particularly sewage flooding, many homes would be uninhabitable. So the problem that we've got here, in just one dimension of life in DC, is immense. The survivors are tasked with maintaining the infrastructure of almost the entire city to ensure that their shelter is habitable. As we add more dimensions, the situation continues to look worse as these problems compound. Fire risk becomes much higher when you don't have a reliable water infrastructure or personnel, what we find is that these problems and risks interact with each other. Each piece that a society relies on supports the others. They are interlinked. Hell, the streets are littered with garbage and there are piles of dead bodies. This is extremely unsanitary to say the least. This affects people, food, and animals. Unoccupied buildings would quickly be overrun with pests and animals. These in turn have ramifications on food and water management. Can you imagine watching a heavy rainstorm carrying torn open body bags and excrement down the streets? The bottom line is this: with less personnel to do maintenance, less expertise on how to do maintenance, systems are bound to fail. Even if they fail for only a short period of time, that can have lasting ramifications, even disastrous ramifications. As one system fails, others fail. This leads to a cascade failure. All of these systems and people being interlinked, they all start to fail. Assuming the situation in DC is pretty close to what's happening across the country, any reasonable person would leave a large city. The infrastructural requirements of a big city make maintaining such a location untenable. Supply lines that exist today are completely cut off. There may be some way to have boat traffic, but all of the roads and highways are blocked. They would take an extremely long time to clear. All traffic would have to be done via helicopter or by boat. Everything manufactured in today's global economy relies on transportation of goods. Not only would manufacturing be completely defunct due to lack of personnel, but also by a lack of these goods. What this leads to, inevitably, is that all of the technologically advanced products that we and the settlements rely on would eventually fail beyond repair. The settlements would eventually have to migrate out of the city. Even settlements outside of cities would have their struggles. Do you rely on a water treatment plant? Better hope you can keep it running. Gas power plant? Good luck getting the fuel that you need. Live downstream from a mine? Better hope that toxic runoff doesn't get into your water supply. Even in the context of the division, we've got a nuclear power plant that is the site of at least one skirmish. Whatever government is left needs to be able to safely decommission the plant. You can't bet the safety of the rest of the human race on being able to have the knowledgeable personnel alive and the parts needed to keep the plant running. What we see here is the precipitous fall off of civilization. Once a critical mass is reached, human society will have to step down several levels before it can rebuild. We see some of this in the settlements with rainwater collection, for example. Our technological solutions will only last until spare parts run out. Given the state of the infrastructure in the United States, communities may form into rough city-states, disconnected from each other. If supply lines are somehow reopened or maintained, it is possible that trade and even manufacturing of basic goods may return. The question is, can the information required to operate such a society be preserved long enough to allow the survivors to rebuild? This information seems to be on servers and in the minds of a few knowledgeable people remaining. We would need these resources to last long enough for the recovery to return. So, this returns us to the question: what are the BTSU and True Sons really hoping to accomplish? They intend supposedly to enforce a central government on what? There's nothing left. No adjacent city-state, even if it exists, is going to follow your supposed government that just sprang up overnight. They have no reasonable way to project their power or spread their influence. Without infrastructure, they have no way to even ensure movement between different population centers. They also don't have enough personnel or equipment to occupy a full country. Washington, D.C. might be the former home of the U.S. government, but it doesn't have any real value as a strategic target in this scenario, and neither does New York. All we've got left in DC is people too stupid to leave, and the people who are government agents who are obligated to stay, because that is the military location they have supposedly secured. It has shade nodes and servers, but without a location outside the city to relocate all their assets to, they essentially can't leave. But again, we return to the central problem. Why was the BTSU and even the True Sons attacking us? Why risk pushing the fragile remains of society to the brink? The Countdown power plant is a perfect example. Not only has conflict there risked a nuclear accident with regional consequences, it also risks the personnel required to deal with it and keep it stable. The personnel problem makes conflict in this scenario an absurdity. Preservation of life and the expertise needed to save what's left of society would take precedence over everything else. There are no large governments, competing global interests, or anything like that that would get in the way of this prime directive. What's the point of conquering America if America ceases to exist and it devolves into a radioactive wasteland that has been set back technologically by 100 years? So herein lies the central problem with the Division's plot. People are fighting for no reason. They're fighting over nothing for nothing. Spoilers ahead, you have been warned. I get that it's a game where you kill people, and there are big battles, and sometimes gameplay takes precedent over lore, but there's still room for a plot that satisfies both. Even assuming the BTSU want to take over, there's no reason why they wouldn't try their quote-unquote mind games right off the bat. They could have just allied with the Division. Assuming there would be a time when the government stood back up, they could initiate the power struggle at that point, once there is some semblance of control that can actually be exerted in an actual developed society to take control of. If we want to make the plot spicy, maybe BTSU is secretly supplying factions in DC to weaken the Division, just like it was in the original plot. Then, when they arrive, the Division is much more likely to play ball. President Ellis could have ushered in this alliance, made it official. With our combined strength, we work together to put out the other factions. With the Division fat and happy and trusting their counterparts, Natalia pushes her propaganda. Eventually, the BTSU Order 66s the agents of the Division who don't play ball. The BTSU works with a scalpel instead of a razorback-headed hammer. In reality, they'd at least clear the roads and reopen supply lines, but we'll leave that out for now as we're making some compromises for the sake of gameplay. The execution of Division agents wouldn't even have to be en masse as it was in Star Wars with the Jedi. It could be one by one. Convenient accidents, agents that have supposedly gone crazy, agents that have been flagged as rogue, whatever. As the agents start to die, maybe the conspiracy is unearthed, or maybe it's a mystery that we have to solve. Eventually, it could devolve into war, but one that never risks the settlements. The settlements should always be neutral locations, as both sides have an extremely vested interest in keeping them intact and their personnel alive. Our missions instead become about a power struggle simply between the Division and the BTSU, and maybe we can even switch sides and become a rogue agent if we want to. What we're left with is a gameplay situation that is almost identical to what we have now, just with better, more interesting lore to back it up. Whew, now all of that was just a wrangle around the stupidity of the BTSU as a whole. Now let's look at some of the individual characters that really piss me off. We're going to discuss number 1, rogue agents in general, number 2, Faye and Barton, and 3, Cal and Johnson. First, rogue agents. Why can't we talk to or negotiate with any of the rogue agents? I understand that this might not be possible because of gameplay restrictions, but we take a lot of shit from the characters because of things we can't control, mainly that we are a one-agent wrecking ball that absolutely destroys every enemy in our path. Theo Parnell says he's got mind-blowing data that will turn us over to his side, but he just doesn't share it in any way. None of the rogue agents do. They just tell us we're wrong, we're on the wrong side, etc., but they never give us any damn evidence and we never have any agency. This is really frustrating, not only because I hate being berated for things I can't control, but also because there have been some really smart thought experiments explored in this latest season. Why rogue agents can still use SHD tech, for example. This scenario sounds exactly like it would happen in real life. We don't expect an AI to always share our morality or be able to adapt to the situation, so agents would be flagged as rogue but still have access to their tech so they can still succeed just in case the flag was in error. Another example of frustrating rogue agents is Douglas Harding's daughter. We kill her without so much as talking to him or her about it. It's just kind of a thing that happens with no discussion. There's so much potential for juicy dialogue here, and instead we get nothing. It's like Doug doesn't even know his daughter's dead. We just killed her without a second thought. Second, Faye and Barton. Faye betrays the Division to go deep into cover as a double agent for the Division. Her reasoning and the execution of this idea is actually extremely good. The only thing that really derails this character is her demise. Why doesn't she surrender? In real-life battles, even when national interests and well-formed ideologies come into play, soldiers, hell, even whole units surrender when they lack fighting strength or are cornered. Defeat is never total. This goes double for Barton, whom the most idiotic advice is given to by Faye. She basically tells him that she hopes the division doesn't kill him, and they form no plan to try and make sure that doesn't happen. Somehow, by the grace of God, he was spared and ended up in a coma instead of dying outright. This has become such an obvious and cringe plot device of a ticking time bomb of information that I literally can't stand thinking about him. It would have been much more believable if he tried to surrender only to have one of the BTSU goons or even Johnson take the shot and somehow he survives. Either way, it's clear that he's the one missing piece to unlock all the mystery boxes we're currently infested with, so he'll wake up whenever the plot demands it. The only thing that would make his current condition bearable for me would be if we knew what would wake him up. Getting that MacGuffin would drive the plot and give us something to strive for, rather than just waiting around for a random trigger to magically wake him up instantly. Last, Cal and Johnson. These two are giving us a lot of answers, but they also raise a lot more questions. For example, why doesn't Cal take control of the division and or the government if he's supposed to be in charge of it? His hunter program kinda makes sense, but also is disappointing when we look at the broader scheme of things. Division agents as hunters seems like the most bland explanation for the hunters that they could have come up with. If he was in control of the division, he could just use other division agents to track down and eliminate rogues in the open rather than having a secret cabal of hunters. His relationship with Natalia is also very confusing. In light of this, Agent Johnson's betrayal makes no sense. As I said before, he's the latest in a long line of rogues like Theo, who seem to know quite a bit, and yet they don't actually tell us anything to convince us. They just yell at us that we're wrong, and don't actually give us anything to work off of. If he wanted to convince us, just talk to us. If he wanted to kill us, just shoot us in the back of the head. All this wraps up into a situation that I just can't stand. We've got so much mystery that there isn't really enough substance to stand on. Groups like the BTSU and individual characters are making decisions in a way that just doesn't make any sense, and transparently act as plot devices. We are so close to greatness, a great story, but we just don't get it. At this point, the lack of information and repeated inconsistencies has worn me down so much that I just don't see how they're going to wrap things up in a satisfying way. Let's hope for the rest of the plot of Division 2 and the setup of Division 3 that they take some of these critiques into account and improve the story. They've got a ton of great stuff to build on. They just need to take it a bit farther to seal the deal. Alright agents, that's about all I've got. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. It took a long time to put together. If you enjoyed this topic, put out some thoughts down below, or sanity check me in the comments. If you preferred the other topics, tell me what you'd like to see. All feedback is welcome. Until next time agents, this has been Dispatch. Thanks for learning with us, and take care out there.